Peace, healing, and light, family, and welcome back to another episode of Healing with Angelica's podcast, where we discuss all things healing. And if you are new to the show, welcome, beautiful souls. So on today's episode, we have an amazing guest joining us today. Minister, mentor, and public speaker, and founder of Deal, Heal, Fulfill, Earnest James, as we'll be discussing today's topic, the silent grief of fatherless daughters. Ernest, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I am good. I am good. Can you hear me clearly? I want to make sure my mic is on. But yes, thank you for having me on. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to share. But yes, I'm excited to be here and looking forward to diving into this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. It's such an honor to have you on the show. So looking forward to today's topic. And for those who may not know you, James, if you don't mind letting our audience know just a little bit more about you.
Yeah. So greetings, everybody. My name is Earnest James. I am a podcaster, a speaker, a author, a mentor. I do a whole lot of things, right? But my mission is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with their problems, to heal from their pain, and to fulfill their purpose. And so I achieve that in different ways through podcasting, through speaking, through books that I've written, and things of that nature. But just really just a guy that has a heart for people. Grew up in the church, being raised in the church, and doing community service through the church, and visiting, nursing homes and rehabilitation centers, and people who a lot of people have forgotten. You know what I mean? And so just grew up with doing that service, and just over time it just grew with me as having a heart for people, to now as an adult. That's my mission, is like however I can help, and whatever ways that I can help, I just look for those opportunities. And today is is such as such an opportunity that is presented on a topic that is dear to my heart. And we can get into the backstory about how I got into it, but that's just me in a nutshell. I'm a person that has a heart for people, and I just want to help us to heal in whatever ways that I can.
I love that so much, James. Me and you are definitely in the same field when it comes to healing our people. And I love that, you have your own way of helping our people healing. Our people to heal, right?
Mhm.
So I'm looking forward to today's show. And for my viewing audience who may have any questions, please put your questions in the comment section below. This is going to be a well-needed topic. And my brother,
Mhm.
he's been doing the work. I know he'll be able to come through with an answer, right? So now let's get started on today's episode, Silent Grief of Fatherless Daughters. And please, for my audience today, do not hesitate to put any questions you may have for our guests, Ernest, in the comment section below, right? So, unlike myself, growing up without a father leaves an invisible mark, one that often goes unnoticed, even by those who carry it. The absence of a father can create a deep, silent grief that manifests in different ways, such as low self worth, trust issues, and lingering sense of abandonment or a constant need for validation. Many fatherless daughters learn to be strong, independent, and self sufficient, but beneath that strength often lies unspoken pain. This conversation is about acknowledging that pain, understanding its impact, and finding a healthy way to heal. By bringing the grief to the surface, we can begin to process it, release it, and reclaim our sense of self. And that brings me to my first question for you, Ernest. Now, I always go to the meat and to the start of it all, right? So, what started your journey in Deal, Heal, Fulfill, and embarking on that journey and addressing fatherless daughter crises?
Yes, yes. So a couple years ago, maybe about 3 years ago, I found myself going through a divorce for the second time, right? And so I was like, all right, what part did I play in this? Because I'm the common denominator of two failed marriages, and so I started to look at myself, and when I started to go back into my dating history, I realized that every woman I've ever dated was a fatherless daughter, which is quite different from me because I was raised in a two-parent household with my mom and my dad, for my entire life. And so when I realized that, I'm like, all right, so for whatever reason, either I'm attracted to them or they're attracted to me, but we keep connecting. So what can I do to help this demographic of young ladies that I'm coming in contact with? And so I have one child, one biological child, which is my daughter. She's 21 now. Um, so I started to think about what are the values that I would like to, that I myself have poured into my daughter, right? And then I also looked at my dad and said, what are the values that my dad poured into my sisters? I have 5 sisters, you know, so just going through that and realizing that, and then looking at the my dating history again, dealing with fatherless daughters, what were some of the things that I seen that was kind of missing, or maybe they needed to be addressed, to help the fatherless daughters. And I started doing that research in that space, and so I started an Instagram page called Friends of Fatherless Daughters. And so I went on there, and I just was just kind of sharing my heart, as a girl dad, as a brother, just giving my advice on, different things that fatherless daughters could do to help themselves, in different areas where they were feeling, abandoned and things of that nature. And a young lady contacted me and was like, would you like to be on my podcast? So at that time, I had never done I heard a podcast. I never done one, never been on one, never even listened to one. But I was like, all right, cool, I'll do it. And so I did that podcast. After I did that one, I was contacted by about 5 other people to do like 5 other podcasts. So I ended up doing like 7 or 8 podcasts, talking about fatherless daughters. And I had the opportunity to meet one of the hosts in person, because we did virtual like this. But I had the opportunity to meet one of the hosts in person to for lunch. And over lunch, we were talking, and he was like, you know what? I think you should have your own podcast. And so I started the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. We are now at 180 something recorded episodes at this point. But one of the things, I never lost my touch for the fatherless daughters, even though that podcast has a broader audience and we deal with a lot of different issues. I never lost my heart for the fatherless daughters. And whenever I would have a girl dad on, I would ask them 2 questions. What does it mean for you to be a girl dad? And what is something that your daughter has taught you? And I always got great answers to that, to that question, which led me to say, you know what, I need to make this a whole podcast by itself. And so I started the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. And on that podcast, I talk with other girl dads and sometimes daughters, talking about that daddy daughter relationship. And I really wanted to promote the voices of the girl dads and the daughters, in order to combat the narrative of the absent father and the fatherless daughter, to let people know that, yes, there are dads who are active and very present in the lives of our daughters, and we love our daughters. Unfortunately, there is a demographic that of fathers who have been absent for whatever reason, a multiple, array of reasons, but there still is great, healthy fathers and father figures that are very active in the lives of our daughters. And that's kind of, long story short, how this journey all began.
I absolutely love that. Oh my God, so beautiful. And you are doing such a great job. I wanted to kind of go back on when you
Mhm.
stated that you noticed that you were either attracting women with that, didn't have their fathers in your life, and you didn't know if it was something from you because of maybe, I mean, you grew up in a two
Yeah.
parent, but then you noticed that you were attracting women that didn't have fathers. Did you ever come to find out what it really was? Was it the women being more attracted to how you are as a man, seeing that it may be a difference of how you are personality wise because you grew
Mhm.
up in a two-parent home?
Yeah.
Like, how did you kind of like decipher, like, okay, this is a woman's issue, like it's the woman's, it's not you, it's not that you attracting it, but
Mhm.
you're saying that it's an issue with the woman.
Yeah. So I want to say an issue, it just an attraction, right? And I think it played on both parts. A lot of times, uh, let's just say broken people are attracted for different reasons, and so there was a part of me that was broken too, which why I believe that sort of part played into the part of me attracting fatherless daughters. So when I was younger, I had my own self-esteem issues, right? And I remember this may be way before a lot of y'all time. We used to have a saying, "Light skin was in," right? And so we was going through this, the I'll be sure phase, the light skinned guys that was all over over the place, and at that time when I was younger, that was like the end thing. And so being a dark skinned person, we were sometimes less attractive to the young ladies at that time. And so I dealt with that personally because I kind of got the mindset of, number one, a little bit of unworthiness myself because it was like, they're not attracted to me for whatever reason. And then also sort of an attitude edge on it too, because it was kind of like, oh, well, you don't think I'm good enough for you? Well, I'm not going to, I'm not even going to try to influence you to think I'm good enough, but I'm just going to go into the people. I would say I'm attracted to people that's attracted to me. You know what I mean? So I kind of was like, oh, you don't want me? Cool. I just deal with the ones that want me. But I think there was that added to the way that I presented myself to women, to young ladies, because those who were attracted to me, I was just like, hey, and I kind of, I always been a gentleman, you know what I mean? So even that was a little different when you think about fatherless daughters because they don't have that example. So they don't necessarily know what that looks like. And so a lot of times they are attracted because they're looking for something, but they are attracted to what they perceive to of what a good guy looks like. But a lot of times they don't get that. And so when I come along, with my personality of, kind of overdoing it, maybe, you know what I mean, with the kindness and the and affection, things of that nature, we just connected at that point. So I think my issues of self-worth, kind of attracts their issues of self-worth too. And I think that was part of it that brought us together, as well as the demographics. I think opposites attract too on some level. And so with me being raised in a two-parent household with a father that was very present, very active, very involved, and them on the other side being, not having that at all, I think those opposites also attracted.
Absolutely. As we're even talking about this subject, I couldn't wait to kind of talk about this subject only because um I didn't have my biological father in my life growing up. I did have my stepfather, and I'm grateful for him.
Mhm.
However, growing up, me and him didn't have a relationship growing up. So I really didn't have that daughter father bond going on.
Right.
And I believe that, if I did have my father in my life, I would have avoided a lot of different things
Yeah.
I went through as a young girl, not knowing my self-worth and my value when it came to men. Um and as I grew up, I was able to actually finally have a conversation with my biological father, because there was a sense of abandonment there, because he
Mhm.
did come in my life when I was like 13, and then he left again. And then I noticed that from that point on, when I was 13 years old, when he came in my life and then he left after I haven't seen you in years. Like,
Hmm.
it's like, how you gonna come and leave? So unconsciously, I built up this wall to where I will never get close to men again.
Hmm.
Like it was something in me to never fully put my all into a situation, relationship, because of the fear of getting left, the fear of
Yes.
abandonment. So it took, it took until now, I'm in my 30s, I'll say probably around my when I was 27, 28, for me to realize, like, why is all uh my relationships with men ending out the same way? And I
Hmm.
had to go back and do some thinking, like, okay, this ended the same way. Why? And I went back and I noticed that, for one, it was for me not putting my all into the relationship, for one.
Yeah.
And then it started that moment when my father left and did not come back. And then it was this cycle of when he'll pop up out of nowhere.
Hmm.
That I did not like. So it was that unsurety, that not knowing you're going to stay, you're going to leave, and then also not wanting to be hurt. So
Yes.
understanding that did a lot to me emotionally and psychologically growing up. However, as I'm grown now, I'm able to not allow that to affect me in a way that it did when I was a little bit younger. But I want to ask you, with you doing this work, right? I know you've had a lot of conversations with different women within this
Hmm.
aspect of having not having their father in their life. So, what are the most common emotional and psychological effects that you've noticed from women growing up without a father?
Yeah. So first of all, I wanna congratulate you, right, for not only noticing, but then taking the accountability and looking inside, right? Because that's one thing that when I talk to fatherless daughters, I have to tell them all the time, which they don't like a lot of times, is you have to deal with you, right? You can't control your dad. You can't control the men that come into your life. You can't control none of that. All you can control is how you react to it and how you process it. But that means you got to do the work, right? You got to do the inner work to deal with your issues that you have. And I don't like saying issues, but please forgive me and don't take offense when I say issues, because I don't like that term. But you have to deal with the things that's internal, that has to do with you. And so and I would also say this: you can't, when we talk about being able to control how your father or how the men in your life show up, you can't control that. And unfortunately, there are some dudes that just not worth it. You know what I mean? And sometimes they may be our fathers, and we just have to realize, okay, I have to love you from a distance. You know what I mean? I have one young lady I remember talking to, and she didn't have a relationship with her father growing up. And so as an adult, we're having this conversation. I said, well, you're grown now, and so if you want that relationship, don't wait for him to come. Like, you're an adult now, so you got to be aggressive in the things that you want. So if you want that relationship, you have to make it happen. And so she got together with her sisters. She had two sisters. They got together. They went to their dad's house, and they're like, all right, dad, we're going to take you out for dinner. Just you and the daughters. We're going to take you out to dinner, and we're going to have this nice dinner. And he was like, oh, cool. That's amazing. Thank you, guys. Let me run to the store right quick, and I'll be right back. He never came back. So he left all three of his adult daughters, who he wasn't very active in their lives as children, but now they reached out to him to bridge that gap as young adults, and he still walked away. You know what I mean? And so, unfortunately, we do have those stories, but that's not everyone's story. And again, it goes back to what I was saying: you can't control them; you can only control yourself. So one of the bigger issues that comes out with one that you dealt with was building that wall to protect yourself, right, against being hurt again. But there's another one that also plays a big part, and that is the self sabotage, right, which has happened in some of the relationships that I've dealt with fatherless daughters, because I don't I think I'm a good guy. Let me put it that way, right? I think I'm a good guy. I try my best. I had the example of a mother and father, together to sort of see the ups and downs of life and still stick it out. And so that's have been my example. And I try to bring that into my relationships. But I have found that in some of my relationships, that became a problem because some of the fatherless daughters deal with the thought of it may be too good to be true. Right. And so you get this guy and it's like, oh, he's nice, he's attentive, he's doing all the things that I want him to do. It's like, yeah, he's setting me up. It's like he's setting me up to build me up, and then at any time he's gonna pull the rug from under me and leave me hanging. Right. He's gonna run away just like everyone else did. And so in order to protect themselves again, either they build the wall and they don't let the person in at all, or they let them in, and then once things really start going and it's like, okay, it may be too good to be true, then they like, all right, let me leave before he leaves. Right, let me get the upper hand, let me end the relationship, let me do something in the relationship that's going to cause it to end, but at least that way I'm in control of it. And so that's another way that it shows up, and it showed up that way several times in my past. And I'm like, one specific relationship, and I was, having a conversation after the fact, after we had broken up, because one of my things is I try to remain friends with everyone. Right. I love everybody. So the relationship didn't work. It's okay. We fall in love, we fall out of love. That's just a part of life. That don't mean we have to be enemies, which has served me well. And so I've been able to have these conversations after the fact. And that was one of the conversations that I had. And that's like, I was trying to do everything right, like what went wrong. And it was like, it was almost too good to be true, and I felt like at any moment you were going to leave. So I left first, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, man, that's crazy. But we have to also go back to an old thing that we say all the time with, communication in a relationship is so very important. Because I'm like, if we had all of the conversations we were having after the fact, I'm like, if we would have had these conversations in the midst of while we were together, we could have worked all of that out. And so that's one thing I want to also encourage, our fatherless daughters to do, is to have these conversations up front. you know be able to be vulnerable with your man and say, look, this is what I'm dealing with, and give him the opportunity to reassure you, give him the opportunity to be there for you, give him the opportunity to show up and show you something different than what you expect or may have expected or may have even experienced in the past. And that's one way that we can use to kind of continue to build our relationships and become better.
I love that. I love that. You brought up that self sabotage. Woo! That is definitely one. And it also goes into just being able to protect
Hmm.
yourself. So you try to get out the relationship before
Yeah.
you even think it's going to end, or you try to even, do something crazy just to
Yeah.
relationship up because of the fear of being hurt or the fear of that happening again. So I'm so glad that you brought that up in particular, right?
Hmm.
So, if you guys have any questions, please put it in the comment section below. My brother is really going in on this topic, such a beautiful topic. And I had another question for you, right? So, how does um, having absent father impact a woman's self esteem and their sense of identity?
Yes, yes. So on this journey, like I said, just taking myself in consideration of, you know, my family that I've dealt with. Um, should I say, watching my family as far as my sisters, watching my loved ones who were raised without fathers, because everyone didn't have that opportunity, wasn't blessed with the opportunity that I was to be raised with my father, right? And so, taking all of those things in consideration, I wrote an ebook called The Four Core, and it's the four core values that every daughter should get from her father, right? And so, when I looked at the things that I wanted to pour into my daughter, when I looked at the things that I felt were missing in some of the fatherless daughters that I was in contact with. And also when I looked at the values that my dad poured into my sisters, at its core, I came up with these four values, right? And it's guidance, it's affirmations, love and affection, and protection. And so these values are just some, I would say, just the foundation of what a father brings into the life of his daughter, an active father, right, brings into the life of his daughter. And those set the foundation of their relationships. It set the foundations for their own self-esteem. It set the foundations of the way they make decisions, the way they approach things in life. All of those is like right on point with the foundation. And so I'll go into a little explanation of each one. The first one being guidance. And so when we think about guidance, I always say, I'm, I ain't gonna say unfortunately, but the reality is women are more emotional than men, right? And we make our decisions from that space. So men are more factual driven, women are more feelings driven, right? And so when it comes to guidance, that's one of the things that a father does, which he kind of pours into his daughter to be able to make sound decisions that's based off facts and not feelings, right? And so when they're able to make sound decisions in every part of their lives, then they can make decisions that's built off facts, and that's in the best interest of whatever that is that they're trying to do, and not to be necessarily controlled by emotion, right? So when I think about guidance, I give the example of my daughter coming to me when she wanted to buy her first car, and she like, Dad, I want to buy my first car. I got my down payment, and I got all these things, and I want to go and go get this car, and I got my down payment so I can have low car notes. And I said, that's good, right? And so one of the things as a dad is, not only when it comes to guidance, not only just teaching our daughters good things, but also better and best, right? And so her decision to come with a big down payment and all of that was a good decision. But through my guidance, I was able to say, let's hold off, let's focus on your credit so you can walk in there and sign your name without putting any money down. That's a better decision, right? But that's guidance. That's where we come in and we begin to lead our daughters in ways of making decisions. And again, that based off facts, and they don't take no feelings with that. You know what I mean? So um, that's the guidance. Then we talk about affirmations. When I talk about affirmations, I always say affirmations is telling you things you should know about yourself, but maybe you don't recognize yet. Right. So as your father, being able to, for me to be able to say, you are beautiful, you are smart, you are capable, you can do whatever you put your mind to, and affirm you in those spaces, your self-esteem, and adds into your self-worth and what you feel about yourself, which also adds to how you show up in the world. Because when you are able to show up in with that self-esteem and hold your head up, you are able to present yourself with respect, and you're able to get respected at the same time. You know what I'm saying? And so just being able to be affirmed by your father before you step out into this in the world, right? Because I always say, you don't want the first time your daughter to hear a man says, I love you, is outside of your home. You know what I mean? Like you want to be the first voice of a man to say to your daughter that your daughter hears, I love you. You want to be the first voice that says you're beautiful, that you're smart, that you're capable. You want that to be your voice. So when she steps out into this world and she's approached by Nuck Nuck and Bobo and, saying the guys on the block, it's not her first time hearing that. And so she's already confirmed in that in herself to be able to say, yeah, I know all of that about myself already because my dad told me. So you have to come with me with something more than just words. You know what I mean? And so that goes into the affirmation and love. When it comes to love and affection, we also have to be our daughter's first line of what affection looks like, right? What good affection looks like, what safe affection looks like, right? Because unfortunately, in the absence of a father, a daughter is exposed to the predators of this world, both men and women. You know what I'm saying? That will prey on their hearts. They will prey on, the spaces that they see that's vacant, right? And I tell this story of my cousin when we were younger. My cousin, and forgive the terminology, but this was the terminology that we used when we were younger. He was attracted to hood rats, right? He was attracted to girls that was like real streetwise, right? And then, it's like the opposite. We grew up in the church boy. That was just what he was attracted to. But he had the eye for it, right? He would be able to tell the type of girl, the type of the girl if that met those demographics, should I say, from a mile away, right? So I remember walking in the mall, and we'll be walking in the mall, and it'd be like girls like way down the hall, and he would see them, he'll spot them from way away, and he was like, he could just be like her right there. And by the time we get in contact, like close enough to make contact with him, he would say something like crazy off the wall to me. It's like, what? You really said that to her? But she would laugh and she would find it engaging. Next thing you know, she would give him her number. But he was able to see whatever that brokenness was in her, to know that she would go for it. He was able to see it just by vision, right? And so in that same way, there are men and women who will prey on fatherless daughters because they know they have those vacant spots in their heart and they're able to see it, right? And so as fathers and as father figures, and I like to say father figures too, because all the time, sometimes our fathers, our biological fathers, may not be active in our lives, but we can have great father figures and men that come into our lives and come into our daughters' lives that can be positive and pour into them just as much as their father would and should have, And so as father figures and fathers, it's important for us to show up in our daughters, to be that voice, to show them what good love looks like, to show them what good attention looks like, to show them what good affection looks like, so that they don't fall victim to the predators of this world. And lastly, we talk about protection. So when we talk about protection, a lot of times, always go back to like the scene in Bad Boys, right? And with Will Smith, when the boy comes to date his daughter, right? And we always think about that protection, that physical protection. If anything happens, I'm going to show up. I'm going to do this to protect my daughter, and that's good. That has its place. But one of the things I say as fathers, when we're looking into how we show up for our daughters in the space of protection, I say let's switch out the word protection to safety, right? And providing safety for our daughters, not just physical safety, but the safety to be herself, to show up in rooms, to show up in spaces as herself, to be able to feel confident in herself, to use her voice, to speak up for herself, to advocate for herself, because these are all things that in the absence of a father, we don't necessarily get, or they don't necessarily get, right? And they don't necessarily have that voice that they feel like needs to be heard or should be heard. And then, especially when it comes to men, there are men who will prey on their vulnerabilities and will show up in spaces like, they love them in different ways, but then shut them down at the same time. Like, okay, no, what I say goes. When I say, jump, you say hi, or whatever. Or even in a workspace, to be in a workspace that is dominated by men, to feel like a man who may be your supervisor or something like that, and suppress you and not allow you to speak up. But when we provide safety as fathers for our daughters to say, feel safe to stand up and be the person that you want to be, to speak out for yourself, to speak out on behalf of yourself, then they're able to show up in the workplace. They're able to show up in relationships. They're able to show up in whatever spaces that they occupy, and feel strong within themselves to be able to say, this is how I feel, this is what I believe, and this is how I represent myself, and feel protected enough and safe enough to show up in those spaces that way. So those are just some of the things that, again, I wrote that in the ebook, The Core Four. And there's also a chapter in the book where I talk about the Poor Four, which is the opposite of the core four. Because a lot of times when our daughters don't have the core values that their fathers pour into them, unfortunately, they attract those opposite values, right? So instead of attracting a man that's comes with guidance, they'll be attracted to a man that's controlling, right? Instead of attracting a man that leads with affirmation, they are attract a man that uses defamation to beat them down verbally. Instead of attracting a man who's shows up with what it really looks like to be loving and physical, show that physical love, they may attract a man who's physically abusive or sexually abusive, you know. And then lastly, when it comes to protection, instead of finding or being attracted to a man that's, you know, protects them and values them, they may attract again a man that's abusive, physically abusive, sexually abusive, or even verbally abusive, you know, of no fault of their own. Because it's just that in our daughters' hearts, there is a place for our fathers, right? There is a place for their fathers. And when that father is not there, that place is vacant. And so they're just longing for someone to come into those spaces. And a lot of times they don't have the words to say what they're looking for. They don't have the knowledge to really understand what they're looking for. They just know they're looking for something. And unfortunately, like I said before, sometimes those men who are predators are able to see those voids and present themselves in a way that they're present to meet those voids until they're getting close enough and then show their true colors. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit about the Core 4 ebook.
I love that. You like literally went in and broke it all the way down. Oh my God. Thank you so much for that. And if you all are enjoying this episode just as well as I am, please, 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 please show your support today by texting the word donate to 937-313-2466. All donations will be towards the building of Healing with Angelica Community Healing Center. And if you are enjoying all of the broadcasts here on Closing the Gap Broadcast Network, please show your support as well. Information to donate will be shown on the screen below. I love you all. Now let's get back to today's episode, The Silent Grief of Fatherless Daughters with Earnest James. I also want to give a shout out to those that have been on. I see we have Dana Marie, peace and blessings. Brother Vincent, peace and blessings. Sister Camila, peace and blessings. Brother Matthew X, peace and blessings. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, if you are enjoying this episode just as well as I am, please put those fire emojis in the comment section below. I need to know if we need a part two for this because this is a very, very meaty and well needed conversation, right? So I wanted to kind of just go in just a little bit like as you were speaking, I'm just listening to how those core aspects are so important for a woman because even me growing up and not knowing my value, not hearing it often, not hearing I love you from a man, not knowing what it actually looks like at a young age from yeah, when I was 13 years old, I got involved in an abusive relationship that lasted for 4 years in regards to that particular relationship. However, within that point of time, I thought he loved me. I thought that's what love is. You know, he wouldn't hit me if he didn't care enough. He wouldn't, do these things if he didn't care or love me like he said he did. So I made it normal for me and I made it my reality until I noticed after those type of relationships, I was finding myself in different relationships with different people, but the same type of characteristics, the same abuse mentally, physically. And that's where it came a point in time in my life, as I'm growing up, getting older. What is going on? Why am I meeting the same type of men? And is it me? Is it them? In a point in time, I'm like, I'm blaming them at this point in time. Like, it's just you men, all you men, y'all ain't nothing, right? Now I'm starting to categorize all men as you not nothing. Forget men. I don't want to, whatever the case may be. But again, it wasn't until I was able to do that self work because now it's becoming a habit. Now, like, okay, they usually say when something keeps showing up, it's usually not them, it's you, right?
Right.
Now, what you gonna do? So it came a point in time where I'm like, okay, well, what's going on with me? Like, what am I doing to attract this? Why am I allowing certain people to hold spaces in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
I love how you use the word vacant, because as women, we do naturally long for this love, this affection, this bond, that if we're not getting it from childhood, from our father, unconsciously, we are yearning from that, yearning for that, from a man. So because we don't know what it looks like, we
Mm-hmm.
typically accept whatever it is that looks like love to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that makes me go on to my next question. And again, if you guys have any questions, please put it in the comment section below. So I wanted to know, like, for me, like I said, I had to go in and do the work myself. Like, I can't no longer blame Bob or blame, my stepdad or my
Mm-hmm.
actual biological father for not being here, because it's like, okay, I'm grown now. What do I do?
Right.
So, like, what are some healthy ways women can break the pattern of the insecurity, the abandonment issues, and the trust issues, dealing with not having that father figure in their lives?
Yeah. So I will say this. One thing that's I've known to be true, right? When I talk about the four core, and I tell men and women this, right, is women never stop needing the core four, right? Even as adults, they still need it. They just looking for it from a different person, right? So when you're a child, you're looking for these values from your father. But then once you get older, you're still looking for these same values, but now you're looking for them to come from your spouse, right? Or the man that's in your life. So you're still looking for him to serve with you to some kind of guidance. You're still looking for him to affirm you. You're still looking for him to show you love and affection. You're still looking for him to protect you. So you never stop needing those values. And then on the other hand, too, just to throw in there, these values are also important to sons as well. When I wrote the book, I was thinking about daughters, but as I got further down the line and started really looking at it and stepping into the spaces as a mentor, as a male mentor to young men that grew up without their fathers, I realized that these same values our sons need too. It's not just our daughters. And so I think that it's important for us to realize that too, that even as adult women, we're still looking, not we, but they're still looking for for those values in the men in their lives, right? So the first thing I would like to say, I would say when it comes to breaking these walls down, like I always say, start with yourself, because that's the only thing you can control, right? Start with yourself by informing yourself, by learning, by reading books about the effects of fatherness, and allowing and accepting and acknowledging how you are affected or how you have been affected by the absence of your father. One thing that I tell fatherless daughters that I hear a lot sometimes is, I'm good, I'm okay. And I'm like, you're not okay. You know what I mean? And you can't just say that you're okay, because you don't even know what you're missing, right? Because you haven't had that experience, you don't know what a father brings. You don't know what you're supposed to have received from him. So how can you say you're okay when you have a whole part of you that has never been, addressed? And so we have to start with ourselves and really looking into how our fatherlessness has affected us as a person. Then number two, we have to unify with people of like-minded experiences, positive like-minded experiences. Let me say that, right? Because we can't heal when we join male bashing platforms and sisterhoods, and it's like, oh, man ain't nothing, whatever. You're not going to heal that way, right? Because either you're going to choose that men ain't nothing and you're gonna keep on attracting men who ain't nothing, or you're gonna go into the other side of the tracks, which unfortunately, if you go on the other side of the tracks, you're still gonna attract the same thing. So if you go on the other side of the track, you're just gonna attract women who ain't nothing, right? That's still gonna bring you that same energy, right? So we have to be able to address what's going on with us to get into positive um environments with like-minded women who are trying to heal, and some who may be even further along down the line with us when we talk about mentors and finding women to follow women who has already been down that street successfully and healed successfully and being able to show up in the way that you want to show up. So getting in those communities. Also, finding positive male mentors to have in your life, right? And this is very important for several reasons. It's important for you as a woman to have positive male influences in your life, right? For a array of reasons, right? For your own protection, for your own guidance. If you don't, let's just say you don't have a significant other in your life, you still need male mentors. And I always say, look for men that's already, number one, doing the job, right? Men that's already in position of leadership, that's already in position of caring. That could be your pastors, that can be your, teachers, that can be your uncles, men that's already in a position that you can see before you even get close to them, like, yes, they are caring, they are providing that leadership, they are providing that father figure, mentality, that and showing up as a father figure in the lives of other people before you even address it to get close enough where they become a father figure to you. Also, that plays a part because they then are able to be a father figure to your children as well, to show your daughters, not just you, but show your daughters what it looks like to have a positive male role model in their life, as well as your sons, what that looks like. Because there's a statistic that I found to be true that says most fatherless children will have fatherless children, right? And one of the questions that I would ask fatherless daughters when I would sit down and talk with them, I would say, what generation of fatherlessness are you? Are you a first generation, right? And unfortunately, they're not. Usually when I have this conversation, it was like, no, my mom was a fatherless daughter. And sometimes her mom was a fatherless daughter. And then when you start looking back, you see it's generations of fatherless daughters, of fatherlessness in their bloodline. And so then my next question is, okay, we see how many generations it goes back. So my question to you is, how many generations is going to come after you? Because now now you've been exposed to the fact that you see this reoccurring in the generations and your bloodline. What are you going to do to stop it? Are you going to address it? Are you going to show up differently and put some things in place differently for your children so that they don't fall victim to this same, generational habit that's going through your family? So I would say start there. Number one, start with yourself. Acknowledge how it affected you. Get the love, get the learning. Do the research to be able to address your own emotional needs. Number two, get into an environment of positive women who are also healing or have healed from their father wounds. And then thirdly, look for positive male role models and real male figures to be in your life, because we need them.
I love that. Thank you so much for breaking that down. And as you were talking, I'm hearing the word this generation, right? And I think the real question is, how do we break that? Like, how could we help in breaking this cycle of fatherless daughter, and not even just it impacting women? I mean, we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the woman. We understand how it impacts her, but understand how much it also affects, um, the men,
Mm-hmm.
just in general too, like affecting men and women. Like, what are your thoughts on things that we can do as a community or just as individuals to help wage that gap of that fatherless daughter or fatherless sons epidemic at this point?
Mm-hmm. I think it's two things that need to be addressed, and two ways we can address it. Number one, for those who were fatherless, right? It kind of is in the same vein, but for those who were fatherless, we have to find male mentors. We have to find groups. We have to find people that are dealing in that space of what it looks like to be a father, what it looks like to show up, right? And so we have to, for those who didn't have the example, we have to go find the example, right? We got to connect with men who are showing up in the lives of their sons, right? Showing up and being able to see those men and say, okay, I want to be like you. I want that mentorship. I want to show up differently for my kids, right? So what does that look like? How do I become a better father? How do I become a father and show up differently in order to break the curse in my family? And on the flip side of that, those of us who were raised with our fathers, who did have the example of what that means, we have to then show up for those who didn't have the example, right? One of the things that I noticed at a young age was how I was blessed to have my dad in my life, right? And I share this story oftentimes. So growing up as a teenager, right, my dad's in my life. My dad was a mechanic. He worked on cars. So a lot of times he would be oily and things of that nature, right? But growing up as a teenager, you got your homies, you hanging out on the block. And one of the things we did, we do what we call shoot the dozens, right? And basically we just cracking jokes on each other. And this one day, me, my brother, and some of our friends are hanging out, and they're cracking jokes on each other. And it's my brother and one of our other friends. And so he starts cracking jokes about my dad, like, oh, your dad be oily all the time. He going, so he went on like a tangent, with these jokes about my dad. And my brother's not saying anything. So when he finished, my brother looked at him. He said, you know what's funny? You can tell me everything about my dad, and I can't tell you anything about yours. And back then when we were young, we're like, oh, it's funny, but I never lost that, right? That statement, that experience never left me. And it was like, man, unfortunately that is so true. So even at a young age, it was pressed upon my heart to be a mentor, to young men. And at that time I was a young man myself. I didn't, but I knew how important it was that my dad was in my life. And I knew how important it was to show up for others. And so again, going back to the a question, the other way that those of us who did have an example of what a good father looks like, what a healthy father looks like, what a healthy husband looks like, we have to then be able to go forth and mentor those who didn't have the example, right? And so that's why now I'm very active in being a mentor. I joined a mentor program, and have, I think at the one location that I work at, we have like 20, 25 to 30 boys that meets every week, that we're able, the other men, the other mentors, we're able to come together and mentor these young men. But now it's so easy to find, these mentors now, because you got Facebook, you got all these different spaces where you could just look online and say, I'm looking for a positive male, community to be a part of, whether it's a prayer line, whether it's a male mentoring program, whether it's just a gathering of men at your local church. Like it's they're out there. But those of us who didn't have the example, we have to go find the examples so that we can become the example. And those of us that did have the example, we have to then mentor those who didn't have, so that they can become the example as well. And if we hit it from both sides, then we'll be able to break the curses to keep it from going from generation to generation.
That was the perfect answer. Be the example. Be the example. And that's the thing. We also have to have the courage enough to do
Mm-hmm,
that. Like, it takes a lot for you, Ernest, for you to be able to even go into that space and deal with people on an emotional level.
mm-hmm,
Like, you really have to have the love for people to deal with things like that, in an instance of not having fathers, and the way that they respond to different scenarios and situations.
mm-hmm,
So that brings up, like, you being humble, you being patient, and you also having understanding and knowing that you had to be the one, because you had that example. And
mm-hmm,
because you had that example, you're able to show them, hey, this is what it looks like.
mm-hmm.
Because if you're not able to see what it looks like, how are you going to know? How are you
Yeah.
going to be able to follow anything, right? So I can honestly say it was with me being able to, for one, understand who I am, understand myself, getting the knowledge of these cycles and what happened, and even get more knowledge about me. Like, who am I? Why am I emotionally strained from different things in my life? This, what makes me get into things like this, right? And from the knowledge I inquire and then the work that I've done on myself, by the grace of Allah, I'm able to, share that. And I always say too, like, and I actually spoke about this before, like, When you're on a healing journey, as you're healing, you bring people with you.
Hmm.
That's how we break the generational curse. You continue to bring others with you on that healing journey. Hey, you hurt, you healing, we healing together. Let's go. You got these issues, okay? We will work on it together. So being able to build that community, and I love the work that you're doing because, again, it's not even just looking into the aspects of the woman. You're looking at the aspects of the whole of the man and woman and seeing
Hmm.
how not having a father in life is really, really detrimental to the next generation to come. So I'm so, 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 so happy about this conversation. I did have one last question before we end today's show. So, what and how can fatherless daughters begin the healing process, especially if they have suppressed emotions for many years? So, how can fatherless daughters begin their journey of healing?
I would say the first journey is necessarily being intentional about your healing, right? And really saying that, you know what, I am going to go on this journey and look for the healing that I deserve, right? Because unknowingly to us, we're always being influenced, right? We're always being influenced. And if we don't have a personal experience of what Father looks like in our lives, then we will build our thoughts and our ideas off of other medias that we're getting of what a father looks like. So I'll share two stories with you, both true stories, right? So there was a young man that I know whose father was killed when he was younger, right? And so he grew up without his father. And one of the things that he would always say was, when I grow up and I have kids, I'm going to be very active in the lives of my kids. And he said that from a young age all the way up until his adulthood. And eventually he had four sons. But when he had these four sons, he was an absent father in the life of all four of his sons. And when I shared that story, I have to have compassion on him, because this is where I tell fathers and daughters that are experiencing this wound, you can only go off of your own life experience. And you can only go off of our minds is like a computer, right? But it can only operate on the information that it has. So if it has no information and no reference point, then it's just going to go on autopilot. So in his experience of what a father was, he didn't have an active father in his life. So just by autopilot, he showed up the way his father showed up. He was absent, right? And so we have to be intentional about, if I'm going to be a father, a great father, if I'm going to be a great father figure, if I want to have great father relationships in my life, I have to be intentional about learning what that looks like. So that means I got to go find the Facebook pages. I got to go read the books. I got to go find the mentors, right? Because that's the part that I have to play, right? So that goes for our sons and our daughters, right? Our fatherless sons and our fatherless daughters. We have to be intentional about our own healing and look, start with those places. Look for a mentor, look for information, look for community, right? And that's in that space. The other part of it is knowing, again, that if you don't have the experience, you're going to draw off other medias to inform you what that's supposed to look like. So I remember having a conversation with a young lady who was complaining about her husband at the time, right? She was a fatherless daughter, and he had came into the life of her and her sons. And so he was their stepdad. And the conversation was that he wasn't showing up, as a father, the way she thought he should have, to her sons. And so I asked her, well, what do you see as a father? Like, what is the examples? And she went to what was informed, what I ended up telling her, like, that's fairy tale land, right? So she went into the things of media, like, he should be hanging out with them and they should be playing basketball together and, throwing the ball and playing catch and all of these, happy things that she had seen from media, because she didn't have that example. And I said, well, that's not reality. That's a part of it, but that's not the whole part of what it means to be a father. So I'm like, how is he showing up? Is he showing up teaching them responsibility? Is he showing up to show them what it means to be a man, to teaching them how to make sound decisions in all of those spaces. She like, yeah, he doing that, but he not, they're not doing the fun stuff. And I'm like, being a father is not fun, right? If you talk to any dad, he'll tell you, when you think about the regular norms, what do we ask for from our men? To be providers and protectors, right? Those things are not fun. To be a protector mean I have to put myself between my family and any harm. That's not fun. That means I'm always putting myself out first. When it comes to being a provider, that means I have to make the sacrifices that's needed to be away from my family, to put the hours in at work, to doing whatever it needs to do that I can provide for my family. Those are not fun, right? So being a father is not always fun. There are some aspects that we do have to address emotionally in the lives of our children that we're showing up that way, but that's not our first defense. That's not our first job. Our first job is to teach you and to protect you and provide for you in the ways that you need it. And so again, when we don't have the example of what that looks like, then we just pick up stuff we hear on songs, things we see in the movies and be like, oh, that's what a dad is. And it's like, no, you need that real actual example, a real life example of what it means to be a father, right? And so when we look at where we are and we address those issues, again, we just have to be intentional about our own healing and making sure that we're putting our best foot forward to do the healing that we need ourselves. And when we begin to change ourselves, then we change our world.
Mm, mm, mm. Such a beautiful, beautiful response. We had to be intentional with our healing. And that's healing in any
Mm-hmm.
aspect or just in anything that you want to do in life. You had to be intentional. And I love the fact that you address that, in reality, being a father and actually doing the duties that are
Mm-hmm.
required as a father, it doesn't look like the whole fairy tale of, oh, I mean, not saying that fathers don't have times they go play with their children,
Mm-hmm.
but if you really think about the amount of work and then the time that we're in now, how vital it is that for when we need our men and fathers and
Mm-hmm.
men in general to be that line of defense, that be
Yeah.
that line of protection for us because of just how crazy the world is right
Yeah.
now general. So, like, understanding the reality that what we see on TV, what we see in newspapers of, the fantasy world of fatherhood, that's not what it is, right? So, I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned that because a lot of us, even just in different aspects of our life, we look at different things and think that that's how our reality should be because it's being brought into us or we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
it in the outer world, but it's not reality, right?
Yeah.
So understanding and being intentional with your handling is so important. And James, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh my gosh, so much to discuss this well needed topic, the silent grief of fatherless daughters. I would also like to thank my amazing audience and healing tribe for joining us today. I pray that this episode was informative, valuable, and the number one thing always healing to you all. Also, be sure to share, like, follow, and subscribe so you won't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes on any of your favorite podcast station. Of course, Closing the Gap broadcast on YouTube, and of course, Healing with Angelica on Facebook and YouTube to help spread the light of healing to others that are in need. So, also, if you are ready to start your healing journey and don't know where to start, Healing with Angelica is here to assist you on that journey. So, Healing with Angelica, we have the one-on-one, the Healing Journey program. As of right now, I am accepting clients from spring and summer. So, if you are interested in starting your healing journey, you can text the word ready to 937-313-2466. Within that, it's a free 15-minute consultation call, which includes the healing journey checklist. And of course, we can go into my new ebook that is out right now, my new ebook, Thrive. is available for purchase. So if you are ready to reconnect with self and reconnect with God, this ebook is just for you, right? So my goal is to get this ebook to over 100 young women and girls before the end of 2025. So if you know any young women or young girls in your life that are in need of this message, in need of this ebook, please share. You can get your copy today by texting a word Thrive to 937-313-2466. Also, if you are ready to expand your brand, partner up with Healing with Angelica and promote your brand today or business by texting a word ads to 937-313-2466. And one last thing before we give it back to my brother Ernest, we have a new product. Healing with Angelica has a new product on our line. We have our sea moss gels. Yes, yes, yes. This is the time of the year where we need to boost our immune system as much as possible. I love the sea moss for myself. It is a great supplement if you're not getting those all your full nutrition in on a daily basis. We put it in the smoothies. We eat it by itself, and it tastes great because it has flavors to it. So if you are interested in getting yours today, just text the word C to 937-313-2466. Ernest, before we end today's show, do you have any closing remark for our audience today? And please, please, please leave us with information so my audience can follow you.
Yes, yes. First of all, let me say again, thank you for being on. Thank you for having the opportunity to be on your platform. And also thank you for being a part of my podcast, The Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Make sure you guys go and watch her episode on The Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. So you can find me on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, which is The Deal to Heal Podcasting Network, where you will find the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, as well as the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Both of those are there. You can get your copy of the Core 4, which is the 4 core values that every daughter should get from her father. That is available at ebooks.com. And right now, I'm also giving away absolutely free the ebook Forgiving Me, the 4-step guide to self-forgiveness, because that's also plays a part in some of the holding grudges against ourselves for the things that we've done in our past. So when you go to ebooks.com, you can get your free copy of the ebook Forgiving Me, the 4-step guide to self-forgiveness. And while you're there, purchase your copy of the Core 4, which is the Core 4 values that every daughter should get from her father. Also, you can follow me on Facebook at Earnest James, and also join our community of healing, our healing community, which is our private Facebook page, which is the Deal, Heal, Fulfill community. We work together, those that are a part of the community, to support each other on our journey of healing and fulfilling our purpose. Because again, my name is Earnest James, and my mission is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. And my last words to all of us today is be intentional with your healing, right? Be intentional with your journey. Be intentional and on purpose about your purpose and what it is that you are here to accomplish in this world. And when we are intentional and we put forth the work that's needed in order to bring our dreams, our goals to fruition and fulfill our purpose that we have in this life. And so that's my word for today. And I want to again thank you for having me on.
Oh my God, so beautiful, Ernest. Thank you so much for that. He told y'all it's time to be intentional with our healing, y'all. Don't wait. Let's start now. Thank you so much for joining me, Ernest. Thank you all, Healing Tribe, for joining us today. And we leave you as we came. Peace, healing, and light. Welcome to Healing with Angelica. About healing, I know that